There's all sorts of interesting things that are made possible with ledgers that could make the whole world better, including the world of AI.
AI and Hedera Hashgraph HBAR is what we're going to be talking about in this video. And I think Hedera is positioned to do extremely well off the back end of the AI hype and narrative. In this video, we're going to be exploring why that is. Hedera is one of the few distributed ledgers out there that is actually scalable enough and sustainable enough to actually deal with the kind of volume that we are going to need in regards to the transactions put through the ledger to onboard the next 1 billion users and the millions of use cases that come with that. And AI is just one of them, but it's one we're going to be exploring in this video. We're really going to be introducing it and showing you guys how a distributed ledger perfectly fits in with AI. And when you think about these distributed ledgers, these layer 1 distributed smart contract ledgers, really all they are is operating systems that people can build upon and utilize to facilitate whatever use case it is. And they're very efficient at doing this. And the first thing that these things need to be is actually able to deal with that. To start the video off, what I want to do is actually dive over to a tweet from Tata. And this tweet reaches: Hedera and Bitcoin just made history within hours of each other, hitting 2 incredible milestones. So Bitcoin crosses the 1 billion transaction and Hedera rockets past 50 billion transactions. It's a huge achievement for both networks. And we can see, of course, this is what is being referred to. So you can see Hedera in purple here. You can see the second closest, of course, is Solana. And then you have the likes of Polygon, Avalanche, and then going right down the chain, you've got the likes of Ethereum, XRP, so on and so forth. So when we talk about the world that we're moving towards and how blockchain or distributed ledgers is going to be integrated into it, and certainly used on the scale that I believe it's going to, the best place to start is with a distributed ledger that can actually facilitate that. And Hedera is nothing short of it. Hedera is now my largest position. Let's explore this concept and actually go and continue to play some clips of Lehman Baird actually talking about AI and how it can be used. Because when we talk about AI, certainly generative learning models, what essentially happens is they basically pull data together and they learn from it. So they come up with probable outcomes. And with a distributed ledger, what we can do is we can safeguard this AI. So we can actually track what goes into it and thus monitor and kind of limit what comes out of it to a degree where it's necessary. And when you think about AI and this kind of singularity concept, you absolutely need a distributed ledger to kind of ensure some kind of credibility, first of all, in regards to the data that's being input into it, and accountability and provenance. And a distributed ledger can absolutely do that. Let's dive over to a clip of Lehman Baird actually talking about this in a little bit more detail. And remember, Lehman actually studied, I think his PhD or his doctorate was in AI before he jumped into the distributed ledger space.
Yes. So DLTs are powerful. The blockchain world knows that. And AI is powerful. And the two together are extremely powerful. And they're both changing the world. And so lots of people are talking about both of them right now because there's just so much going on. And you know, of course, I did Hashgraph and Hedera. I'm a blockchain, DLT, that kind of person. But my PhD was originally in AI. It was reinforcement learning, talking about how you could do with deep neural networks, all the stuff we're talking about these days. So it's just exciting to see it all come full circle. You asked about the intersection. That's what everybody asks about. So there's several different ways that these two worlds intersect. Right now, people are very worried about what happens when you have generative AI like ChatGPT and it is malicious in some way because someone slipped in bad training data. So the beauty of these new AI systems is that you don't program in very much at all. Almost everything is just learned from the data. The bad thing is everything's learned from the data. So if you have bad data, it's garbage in, garbage out. And so we really care about the data. And so you mentioned Equity Labs, which are doing cool things where they keep track of the data used to train the AI. And it may not be that simple. It may be that some data was used to train an AI, and then more data was used to tune that AI, and then maybe even more data was used to train it, and in the future may have that you have two different neural networks that each trained separately, and now somehow they're working together to train a third one. You can even do that. You can have a neural network in the loop of the training, and then you could have humans in the loop, where humans have to say yes or no on various things and give feedback, and you'd like to record what they gave as their feedback. They did additional training. It gets complicated. And so what they were doing is they draw out this entire tree of how data trained the various pieces of this and kept coming in with more data and so on. And it can just get more complicated over time. And then they use Hedera to immutably record this. And so when you finally end up with a model here is the stuff that it learned. It's a bunch of numbers. It's just the weights inside the neural network. But that list of numbers, it is the model that was trained from all this data. They can say, well, here's a hash of it. And if you check it and it has that hash, then you know you have the model that was trained from this whole tree that we have. And then all of this can get anchored into DLT. So the ledger of Hedera can hold all this stuff. It stays forever. It can never go back and be changed. And that's helpful. That is what you need to be able to trust this.
So AI is going to fundamentally change the world as we know it. We are moving towards this kind of dystopian, sci-fi-esque world. And actually, AI brings with it a lot of benefits, but also brings with it a lot of dangers. And one way we can mitigate those dangers is with distributed ledger technology. It amazes me how I stumbled across this industry back in 2012. I won't mention how, but anybody that remembers what Bitcoin and other things were going on with Bitcoin will be able to know what I'm talking about. Not as a partaker, as an observer, from my own point of view. But it's amazing how I stumbled upon this industry. And today, distributed ledger blockchain finds itself at the kind of convergence of most industries. It is solving more than just the financial industry and the kind of monetary industry. It's solving everything. And AI is another perfect example of where a distributed ledger can be implemented to simply improve it and actually, in many cases, be the missing piece of a puzzle. And Hedera stands a good chance of doing exactly that. So they mentioned in that clip, and I just want to show you this, Equity Labs, which essentially is utilizing Hedera to bring open sourced AI integrity framework to the massive. Now, Lehman Baird is very fixated on actually making sure that there's an open sort of source approach to AI because he thinks it's very, very important. What that was, the clip that we just watched was one use case in regards to how you can track data and add kind of verifiability to it with a distributed ledger, how you can kind of track it, how you can kind of make it immutable, and then how you can actually harness that with AI models. What I want to do is go over to another use case. We're only going to cover 3, but in the coming weeks and months, we're going to be covering way more applications and actual live ones on Hedera in regards to how it's tackling and helping the AI space. So let's dive into another example of what you can actually do with a distributed ledger that actually will help AI in regards to data and how you as an individual can gain your rights over it and in actual fact potentially monetize it. And then we'll talk about if you're going to monetize it, how do you get paid? You also need a distributed ledger to do that. And Hedera, being fit for purpose, can do all of this, whereas most blockchains simply would struggle with just one use case given their scalability issues. And they aren't, when you're talking about things like AI, there needs to be a security issue, which of course Hedera has.
Yeah, so maybe that's the low-hanging fruit. Maybe that's the first thing you do. There's a second thing that you can talk about though, which is you have data. Maybe you create things online, or maybe you have just your personal data, maybe your medical data that you are willing to allow people to use to train these AIs. But if they're going to go make millions of dollars off the AI, you would like a cut of that. And so maybe in the future, people will be allowing their data to be used, but they want to get small royalties from it. Also, just the question, did you allow your data to be used or not? So in the medical world, people are doing this. They're looking at using Hedera for keeping track of your permissioning on your data. Which doctors are allowed to see my data and which aren't? Which medical studies are allowed to use my data and which aren't? And I can always revoke my permission. And so use a ledger for that. And of course, just digitally signing something that says you have my permission isn't good because then you couldn't revoke it. It's really why you need a ledger. You need a DLT or a blockchain. You need something that's going to hold that forever and that you have this single source of truth. I can always go back and see if you've ever revoked your permission or not. So permissioning is a big deal already in medical data for medical studies, but it's also now going to become a big deal for AI, I think.
So this is very interesting. When you look at these generative models, they pull data. And actually, when you talk about healthcare, the data that an AI is actually, this is something that is there's a lot of money being poured into AI when it comes to healthcare and how we can actually use AI as a predictive mechanism to essentially help people and to also deal with, like, for example, in the UK, we have issues with waiting lists and things like this. We can use AI to reduce all of this stuff, and we need people's data to do that. But not everyone might want to, because it's our data, be forthcoming with that. So we can actually implement a distributed ledger, not only to track all that data and make sure it's the right data, certainly when it comes to healthcare, it's of the utmost importance, but actually then even monetize it and pay people royalties for using that and allowing them to opt in and out of that. And then, of course, the question is, well, if you're going to pay royalties to people, how do you do that on a scale that is needed? Because, of course, with the traditional rails, it simply wouldn't be. Let's dive into the last clip, and then I'm going to love and leave you.
Of course, if millions of people are giving data, your royalties are going to be very tiny. They can't write you a check every time you have a royalty for 1/10 of a cent. It just doesn't work. The check and the mailing is 100 times more expensive than the royalty. So what you need to do is have micropayments, which means you need to be using cryptocurrency. It can be divided down so small. And so even if you batch it up and only send you a check once a year, if it's less than $1, really you want to be doing this with ledgers.
So as you can see, a distributed ledger is very, very useful when it comes to AI, and actually is largely a missing piece of the puzzle. The thing is with most, this is why my attention's on Hedera right now, because it's just elite, quite frankly. And I am willing to have that debate or argument with anybody. Is it elite at absolutely every aspect of distributed ledgers? Not every aspect, but when you compare it up as a whole, as a project, you've got everything. You've got scalability, you've got eco-friendliness or sustainability is really what that's about. You've got affordability, you've got security, you've got the use cases, the institutions that are already using it. You've got everything, and that's why Hedera is my largest holding, and we're going to continue to be bringing you absolute alpha and heat when it comes to Hedera Hashgraph and its ecosystem. So that's it from me, ladies and gentlemen. We'll leave a link to that full video in the description. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next one.